So we go to 91 Night of Champions. You came back, you didn't do the Olympia that year, you won that, and it was a bit of a turning point for both of us, because at that contest I think we'd offered you a contract and they approached me to come and work in California. So we independently, it wasn't a package.
Because I told Joe I'd only sign with Weider if they hired you at the same time.
And that's why you took...
You thought it was down to your writing skills, but actually it was blackmail.
So that's why I've been giving you 10% of my earnings for the last 20 years.
That's it.
So there we go, 91, you decided to do the Olympia. Now, we had a newspaper at the time, Pumping Press, which used to get reports out 8 to 10 days afterwards. And I don't think I've told you this, I don't think I did you any favours, because Lee Haney told me after the Olympia that normally American magazines wouldn't get... The Night of Champions was May, they wouldn't see the pictures till August. He saw these 10 days after the contest, pictures of you, and he said, here's a guy who's on a par with me, I need to be in shape for this contest.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lee was, that was definitely the best shape he'd ever been in, and of course, you know, his motivation, if he got somebody snapping at the heels, I was the new guy, he could see that, you know, Lee previously dominated just because, you know, had a great physique, but primarily because he was just much bigger than everybody else and overpowered them. And now he's got a guy the same height, pretty much the same weight, that can match him on those strengths. So that motivated him to be in his best shape, and that's what it's all about, you know, trying to move things forward and for people to get better. So yeah, great. He was in great shape, and you know, it was close. It's funny because Lee was Mr. Olympia pretty much when I started training, so I had to change my whole mental outlook towards this guy who was Mr. Olympia when I started training, to be, hey, you're competing against this guy now. But by the time I was competing against him, I had enough confidence in myself to say, look, I actually sincerely believe nobody puts more into this sport than I do, dedication. Nobody trains harder than me, so why not? Somebody's got to beat the guy, and I went to that contest believing that I could. Not like I'm going to win this contest, but I'm going there to give it a damn good try, and it could happen, you know.
Yeah, I always remember the last call out of the pre-judging was you and him, and that was unusual in those days. It was always three, and that comparison, you both put everything into it, and it took 4.5 minutes to do it, because I timed it, and you actually won that round. He won the symmetry round, you won the muscularity round.
Yeah, so I won the you know, the compulsory poses. So actually now, if the contest was now, the outcome might be different, because the posing round's not scored right now, so the score would have been different. But I was still a rookie, you know, I was still learning. Lee was polished, he'd been there for many years, and he was in his best shape ever, so it was very, very close, and I never, you know, I never did complain about that or contest it. I think it was a pretty fair result. Of course, Lee got the 8 then. There's really no reason for him to carry on, especially with somebody snapping at his heels. He'd peaked at his absolute best, where I was still coming up. So I'm confident if he came back the next year, I would have beaten him. But I don't blame him for not doing that. I probably would have done the same thing.
I mean, you said to me after the pre-judging, you thought you were second, and you were fine with it. Like you said, you never bitched about it. You took that for. I mean, second in your first Olympia is some.
I think was the first person to place, actually second on the debut, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it was a great result. I was not really disappointed, because it was the first try, and Lee Haney, you know, is 7-time champion already, so, and it was close. I beat him in 1 round, and I knew that I was going to improve, so it only bode well for the future.
So going to 92, the title is open. You were the favourite. Vince Taylor was talked about as the other guy, because he was third in the Olympia. Was it the night before the show? You were in a mood I'd never seen you before. Can you?
It was a bit strange, a bit difficult, because I was used to being, you know, I kind of thrived on being the underdog. I think everybody in England telling me, oh, you can't be a pro bodybuilder, you can't beat the Americans, and then, you know, all against Lee Haney is this huge icon in the sport, 7 times Mr. Olympia, going up against this guy, and I'm the underdog. So I thrived on that energy, you know. And now it's Lee Haney's not there. There was no target, there was nobody to aim for, so it was a little bit different. Yeah, there was a period just coming into the contest where I find it a little bit hard to focus, but it didn't change what I was doing. It didn't affect my training or my diet or anything. It was just mentally, it was a bit hard to focus. Of course, I wanted to beat Vince Taylor a lot because I really didn't like that guy. So it's unfortunate that he hurt his eye on the coach there, and that threw off his whole conditioning because he was talking a lot all year. So I was glad to beat him and glad to beat Sean, and Kevin was unexpected. You know, Kevin came out of nowhere in second place. So yeah, it was great, but it was a little bit. It was a different experience. Being, I guess I was the guy who was favourite. You know, that was the first time that happened, but I got used to that pretty quick.
And I mean, you came in maybe a bit leaner than you could have done for that, and you were like, what, 240 or 242?
I think it was about 242 at that contest, but I knew Lee wouldn't be there. So who was my competition? I didn't really see Kevin because I think Kevin came from the Night of Champions, so he wasn't really on the radar. So the guys were Sean Ray and Vince Taylor. That they were probably my main competition, and maybe Lee Labrada. So obviously I'm easily much bigger than them. So I thought, let me go for condition, because I'm going to be the big guy, but I want to match the little lightweight guys on condition as well, and that kind of combination. So that's what I brought to the stage. But it was below. You know, it's still a learning process. Don't forget, even though I'm Mr. Olympia, how many contest preparation phases had I gone through? Probably about 5 or 6. So each time you're learning more about your body, you know. So that's why the huge improvement between 92 to 93, the great mystery that, you know, it was just, I didn't starve myself and cannibalize my muscle in the last 4 weeks, really.
Well, I mean, we go forward to 93, and I came back to England 7 weeks before the Olympia, and Kevin Horton took those famous shots with the socks and everything, and that, I told you, you can walk on with the socks on, not tanned, and you'll walk this. I've never seen anything like it.
There's a funny story about those pictures that became so iconic almost, you know, because we had some pictures the previous year in the gym. They weren't actually taken before the contest, they were taken after the contest, I think about 1 or 2 weeks after the contest, so I wasn't quite in contest shape a little bit. I put a few pounds on. But Kevin had took these pictures in the gym. So because Kevin was around and is a good photographer and everything, I'm like, Kevin, maybe we can duplicate the pictures from last year, because I wanted to see for myself, you know, comparisons, and these photos were supposed to be just for myself, you know, hence why I've got the socks on and the underwear and everything, because I just finished a workout and I said, hey Kev, let's stand in the same spot and do those same shots, and let's look, you know, the difference from last year. So just take off the t-shirt and the pants and everything, and still got the socks on, so that's why I'm wearing the socks.
And I got those photographs before the contest. I was in the Weider offices, and I had the before and after, as it were. And in those days, all the guys came in: Flex Wheeler, Paul Dillette. Sure, I showed them all, and it was deliberate. That's what it looked like. That's what it looks like. It freaked Paul Dillette out. I think he doubled his supplementation from there on. You know, and Gary Stridham was the real. He looked at them and said, you know, This is more than bodybuilding. This is personal with this guy. I'll always remember him saying that, and it freaked everybody out. And of course, when you walked out on the stage at 257 pounds, we'd never seen anything like that before, and it was just a tremendous reaction.
I mean, I was very happy because I didn't repeat the mistakes, if you can call them mistakes, from the year before. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy to come in lighter anyway. But what I did every week, from I think it was about 10 weeks out from Mr. Olympia, every year I used to take pictures at home in the same spot, the same light, everything like that. So then afterwards I could go back and analyze. So I went back to analyze 92 Mr. Olympia, and I could see I had shots from 6 weeks out, and I was in contest shape. And I came down in weight, and I came down in weight, and I got a little bit harder, but I also sacrificed a lot of fullness and a lot of muscle to get that extra hardness. So 93, I wanted to get the balance correct. I had a really good year of training anyway. I was still growing, I still improved. I actually came on stage 17 pounds heavier than the previous year. So everyone was freaking out. How the hell did you do that? It actually was not any great mystery. There was no secret drugs or anything. Training was pretty much the same. I cut back a little bit on my training volume. The only difference was I wasn't starving the muscle away. I was eating more calories, more carbs, and actually dieted for a little bit shorter period of time, about 12 weeks as opposed to 10 weeks. And as you say, possibly could have come in the stage even heavier. And Dorian was known as this guy with the mass, the mass monster, all this stuff all the time. But when I was in contest phase, I was never thinking. I was just thinking about I'm going to get into nasty, grainy, ripped up, shredded shape. Combined with muscle size. It was never my goal to try and get on stage as big as possible. I think now the conditioning level is much lower than then, and if I was to try to compete with that condition, then I would easily be probably 15 pounds heavier on stage, as in the black and white photos.
If we move on to 94. This will tell you a lot about Dorian. 7 weeks out, was it? You ripped your bicep. Let me. 6 weeks out. 6 weeks out. So I'm at Weeder. He calls the office. I suffer from bad back now and again. I was at home, prone in bed. So you rang my home. Said, I hear you've got a bad back. He talked for 5 minutes about, well, why don't you try this, do that, do that, blah, 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 blah. So I said, so how are you? He says, I've torn my bicep. And I started laughing, thinking it was a joke. But he was more concerned with me at that point than him. So tell us about, you didn't know whether you could do the contest. The arm was all sorts of a mess.
Yeah, you know what got me from being in this little backstreet gym in Birmingham to being Mr. Olympia is total tunnel vision and being a very stubborn bastard, basically. So I continue to do that, and I can look back now and say, like, the last 6 to 8 weeks before a competition, I should have been training a little lighter, been taking a bit more care, but hey, we're in uncharted territories here. Nobody had ever built a physique like this, so I was using different training methods, and that's the reason that I developed that kind of physique. So who's going to be able to tell me now, you shouldn't be training, you should change your training, stuff like that. I had to find that out for myself. So I continued pushing and trying to pretty much use the same weights I was using in off season, getting ready for a contest. And you're on a diet, your calories are lower, you're doing more cardio exercise, you're not getting as much sleep, you might be a little bit dehydrated. All these things increase the risk of injury. And the last couple of months before a contest, you're not going to build muscle anyway. Your goal would be to maintain muscle, and to maintain is relatively easy, because actually that's what most people do in the gym. If you go there next year, they look the same. It's easy to maintain. So my advice to people now is to learn from my mistake, and just the last couple of months, don't go to that level, of going beyond failure and like low reps. So just be a little bit more cautious and concentrate on maintaining. But yeah, what I was doing was bent over rows with the reverse grip, which was my key exercise at the time for back. I think it was like 440 pounds or something, and on the 5th rep I just bang. If you have a major tear like that, anyone that's having a major muscle tear or a tendon rupture, you know about it. There's no doubt that something's very wrong here. It felt like somebody hit me in the arm with an axe or something. And we didn't know the extent of the injury because I wasn't able to get an MRI because it didn't fit in the machines in Europe. There's like a tunnel and it's too narrow. I couldn't get in there. And of course, the initial thought that hits you is like, shit, that's it. It's over. Like, I'm not going to be able to compete this year, let alone maybe my whole career's over now. All these thoughts coming in, and then start to calm down and say, right, I'm in good shape. Let me see what I can do. Let me see what I can do as far as training. I can stick with my diet, and let me see what I can do in these last 6 weeks. Instead of just saying, right, it's over. If I at that point said it's over, then that's a fact. It would have been over. I wouldn't be in that contest that year. But my approach was to do my best, and if I was in terrible shape 2 weeks out or a week out and I wasn't able to pull it together, then maybe I would have dropped out, but I was able to do enough. You know, I was able to train. I was actually able to do some back training with it, change my grips and everything like that. So it wasn't enough to keep me out of the contest. But obviously, I mean, this is mentally is very tough. You're going to compete against the best in the world, literally with one arm tied behind your back. You know, so that was tough to deal with, but. It's just another challenge, just another obstacle that I had to overcome. And maybe things were too easy for me, I don't know.
Well, it could have been worse. You could have got a poke in the eye, you know.
Yeah, I could have got maybe a luggage strap or something hit me in the eye, which would be devastating.
Oh, Dorian.